Welcome to the 16th video in the Just In Case series, sponsored by Quality Equality, an OD consultancy firm based in Oxford, United Kingdom. And my name is Mayan Chung Judge, and I'm the director of the organization. This mini-series is called Just In Case. Is just in case in our learning journey, we need something to help us to think through something quite tricky, or to be reminded of something, or just in case we didn't know about something, just in case we want to know a topic better. And today, the contributor need no introduction because this is her third video, and that is Dr. Glenda Eoyang, who is the pioneer in the field of human system dynamics. And she founded this HSD, and she used her models and methods to help many others to see patterns in the midst of chaos, and to understand pattern in simple and powerful way, and then to take practical steps to shift those patterns in order for the organization to remain healthy, adaptable, and fit during chaotic time. In this last video from Glenda, she's going to concentrating about the future, and it's the filtering methodology she will share with us. And she will share the foundational pattern identified by the HSD community about the future, and then somehow find out what these patterns may play out and what it may mean for the practice of OD and clients going forward. And it's extremely stimulating, and I hope you will enjoy that. And Glenda, thank you for your offering of your time and wisdom again. So over to you, Glenda.
Thanks, Mayan. I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to sharing the future with you and to looking at what that future might mean. So in 2019, our community engaged in a strategic foresight process. It included many steps. It was an 8-month dialogue to explore what the future would hold and bring it forward. Now, no one has a crystal ball, but anyone can look around themselves today and see patterns and imagine what those patterns might become long-term. So what I want to share with you today are some fundamental foundational patterns we saw, some ways that we see those playing out in our human systems of the future, and then finally, what we think that means for our OD practice and our clients going forward. So we believe that in patterns, there are tensions that play out, and there are multiple levels of tensions. But in our exploration, what we found were 2 tensions that were the source of many others. One of those is the idea of being closed as a human system and the idea of being open as a human system. So if you think about your own engagements with your clients, if you think about your clients, if you think about every news story you read, you'll begin to see that either a group is looking at closing down, protecting, or opening up, connecting, and learning, expanding. So sometimes in OD, we call this the difference between convergent and divergent. Sometimes we talk about it as conserving or exploiting. So many, many different ways of thinking about this distinction. But it was one that we realized is going to drive patterns in future. The second fundamental pattern has to do with our relationship with others and with the ability to stabilize those relationships with others. So one is seeking stability, and the other end of that tension is looking for adaptation. Stability or adaptation. And again, as you listen to stories, as you listen to your own worldviews, you'll see these 2 playing out. Now, these 2 tensions, it isn't either or. You don't choose one or the other. You don't even choose both and. But you ask yourself, which, when? So if we're looking at the open and closed continuum, you need to be able to be closed. You need to be able to be open. And you need to be able to ask yourself in open inquiry, which should I be at this time? Which, when? When you're thinking about being open or being closed, neither of those is perfect all the time. Which, when? When should I be closed? When should I be open? So those two sets of fundamental tensions drove what we saw as all of the future patterns. So as we were looking at data from all around the world, many different perspectives, many different points of view and expectations and areas of expertise, there are 8 patterns that we saw emerging in all different spaces that we think are going to be critical in shaping the future of the human experience. The first one is that change will be both radically local and radically global, with not much in between. And I think our experience in lockdown has demonstrated that already. We, our families, ourselves, our households, and at the same time, wondering and working on a global pandemic. And that in that space, we see our national governments, many of them as not being so useful, and many of the structures and businesses just breaking down, not being able to function effectively or efficiently. Now, that's not true everywhere. Some have been able to adapt and do the work that needs to be done, but not all. And so this idea about radically local and radically global we see unfolding in many ways over the future. The second is that there will be new structures for collaborative action. So if we think about the evolution of institutions and corporations, the corporate structures that have thrived, at least in the West, up through the 20th century, were relationships, governance structures, roles, responsibilities, institutional structures that were great at drawing in, accumulating assets, and distributing them. That was the purpose. And those assets were solid assets. So how do we get natural resources collected and how do we distribute the value? How do we get human resources collected? How do we distribute the value? But those structures don't work so well when the asset is information. Information doesn't work well to have it all accumulated and held in one place, loses value, and it can't be distributed in a way that is not distorting. And so we need other ways of organizing our collective work that will allow us to efficiently and effectively collect information and disseminate it when and where it needs to be. Now, some people talk about these structures as networks, and that networks will meet that need. We think networks may also be a little too structured, and that what we may be looking at is more a cloud of relationships that emerge and then dissipate. But at any rate, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we know that what has been is not going to serve us well in future. The third is that groupings and communities are going to be defined differently. In the past, communities were pretty much defined and dependent on geographical boundaries, physical boundaries, walls and mountains and rivers, and that our communities were defined by what physically bound us. What we're seeing in the future is that instead it's going to be shared interest, regardless of physical boundaries, regardless of political boundaries, that shared interests are going to be the things that define communities and groups who work together over time. The next. And this one's a little strange, but we believe that technology and organization development are going to become so important in the future that they become invisible, that they're going to be absorbed into day-to-day life so that they become the lifeblood of work to be done, that we don't see them separately. We don't manage them separately. We don't even think about them as ends in themselves, but that they're absorbed into the way that work is done, that technology becomes just a part of the possibility So you've heard of the Internet of Things. It's where the Internet is so deeply ingrained it's invisible. We believe the same thing is going to happen to OD, that OD is going to be absorbed into the very fiber of leadership and that it may become invisible. You may think that's a good thing or a bad thing. The next is that we believe that there's going to be, ironically, both massive inequality and perceived equity. And the way we think that's going to work is that wealth is going to be more and more and more concentrated in the very top reaches of society, and that they're going to be able to hide themselves so that we aren't even aware of the difference that exists between the normal people and those who are mega rich. And as they suck resources away, then those of us who are left behind are going to have less and less to distribute. And so ultimately, we'll become more and more equal, so that we will experience a dissolve of the middle class, a dissolve of a kind of technocrat layer of personnel, but that we will become much more equal. In some ways, that's good, that there will be a kind of equality that will happen, and that will only be in the context of radical inequality. We believe that grief and fear are going to be absorbed into our collective stories through art and ritual. Given the way that the news is shared about the pandemic, and given the way that we're talking about decision-making and action and politics and money and numbers, body count, that really is veiling a deep grief, a deep fear that's existing in our individuals and our institutions. And we believe that that will out and that it will come out in the form of arts, commitment to arts, stories, storytelling, and ritual. And even though religion is not a chosen ritual source these days, we believe that there will be rituals that will emerge and will be accepted across the board. We also believe that the tension between generations is going to disappear. What we see now as tensions of traditionalists or baby boomers and younger perspectives of various generations. We believe that that's going to disappear for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of us are just getting old and going away. And so the field will be left to the people that we saw at one time as minority youth voices. But the second thing is that perspective that the youth are bringing is the one that embeds the competencies of the future. They ask tough questions, they learn through action, they stay connected, and they distribute power to the places it needs to be. They have the competencies that we need to move forward. And so we believe that this tension between is just a passing transition phase, and that before long, we're going to have institutions and structures that are really driven by the, quote, younger generations. We believe that the new normal is going to be radically disrespectful of and enormously self-confident. So if we think about that as a stance of youth, as being disrespectful of what was and radically self-confident about the possibility that will come, those are two of the capacities that are going to allow us to respond to and succeed in the future that will come. And the last thing that we've noticed is that there's a possibility for hope. That hope comes through the possibility of action and community connection. That even though many of these 7 changes may seem fearful, destructive, threatening, risky for many of us, they also carry in them seeds of real possibility, of equity, of insight, of caring for the world, of caring for each other, of discovering pathways that really are more healthy and whole. And so that hope, which lies within these patterns, is something that we have seen, experienced, and hope that we can share with others. Now, how's this going to show up for OD? So, of course, because many of us practice OD or management or leadership, the questions that came up in our community were, now what? Not just what is the future, and so what is it going to mean in patterns, but now what are we supposed to do? And these are some of the things that are emerging for us in our practice, and we wonder if you're seeing the same. The first one has to do with planning. And planning, which has been seeing a vision, defining steps, objectives, tasks, responsibilities, moving forward to that. We believe that that kind of planning is not going to work in the future. That instead, what we need is what we call a strategic framework. That it is, in a page or 2 pages, a representation of the pattern that we as a community want to create, as an organization. And so when a decision needs to be made, wherever that decision is made, it comes through that strategic framework. And that strategic framework then becomes the pattern generator for the culture that we want to create. That's what we think planning will become, strategic frameworks. Second is culture. So we believe that culture will not be consistent across an organization or defined at the top and moving down. We believe that culture is going to emerge from individuals taking action based on local intelligence, following a short list of simple rules. That an organization or an institution will identify the patterns that they want to generate, that they'll find fewer than 7 behaviors that would generate that pattern. And then those rules will be carried around in people's back pockets. And when a decision needs to be made, they will act in line with those rules. And then the culture will emerge from there. Leadership. What do we think leadership will be? It will not be personal characteristics of courage or insight or intelligence or even humility. We believe that leadership ultimately is going to be the ability to identify what are the tensions that matter and to build the capacity and insight to find a balance of those tensions that is fit for function in any moment. That leaders will set conditions for their systems to self-organize. And then they'll support that self-organizing process as it moves forward. What's collaboration? Well, collaboration, we're pretty sure, is not going to be legislated, memos of agreement, outstanding perspectives, long structures with steering committees and heavy overhead. We think instead that collaboration is going to be for a purpose in a moment. The right people, the right place, the right time, coming together for a shared goal, shared purpose, maybe short term, doing the work, and then going back to where people came from, and coming together again and going back again. And so that collaboration needs to be quick and easy, targeted, and productive collaboration. What's diversity, equity, and inclusion going to be in this world to come? Well, it's interesting because we don't think it's going to be structures and patterns and labels and expectations and tribes. We think instead that we're going to zoom in to individual relationship, and that diversity and equity and inclusion will be powerful because one person will be standing in relationship to one other person, or one group will be standing in relationship to another group, so that identity and power and voice is shared between them, and that they can create together a new boundary and a new purpose and a new pattern. That's not going to be easy, but there are whispers of it around the world, and we think it will be possible. Finally, what's learning? So those of you who are in learning and development, you've seen enormous changes in that technology and that process over the last 10 years, even more over the last 20 for those of you who are old like me. What we believe in the future is rather than learning being an accumulation and a dissemination of answers, that learning is going to be development of questions, that the practice in action, in relationship, is going to be what learning is. That learning will be the same as doing work. It will be based on the competencies that we listed and expanded in practice in real relevant action. So I don't know whether those things excite you or threaten you. I don't know if you want to fight with them. Maybe so. But that's the future that we saw as we worked together in 2019. And we expected that future to take a decade to arrive. And here it is in a matter of months. And we hope that the things that we've learned and that things that we teach, the things that we see and the things that we do, move you forward in a productive way into that future with our vision. People everywhere thrive because we see patterns clearly, we seek to understand, and we act with courage to transform turbulence and uncertainty into possibility for all. Thank you.
On behalf of everyone, thank you, Glenda, for sharing your discovery and research on this topic of the future. It is such a powerful topic to explore, particularly in time like this. So may I extend my thank you to you and your colleagues here who have given us so much to think about. And we hope that all of you viewers have enjoyed the presentation and will get together some of your friends and colleagues to view the video and to discuss the futuring concept, maybe even apply that in your workplace. And if you want to contact Glenda to continue this type of conversation, all her details are at the end of the video. So a big thank you to you again, Glenda, for taking the time to share. And we look forward to hearing more about everybody else's futuring journey. Be well, be safe, and continue to bring humanity back to the workplace.